writing honestly, I've never felt so stuck. I've been looking for work, but can't get past the loading truck. And school's just not for me, I'm in enough debt from my other bluffs. I can remember the taste of your bottom lip. I know that sounds a little messed up and sick. Can't stop reliving all the things that we did. You probably hate me for being such a stupid spoiled kid. I've tried to move on, write some new songs, but nothing's ever as good as a past. Could be my last chance to enhance my way of life, remove your heart and my mask. But I'm still leaving, sometimes seeing graduation with the rest of our class. And how I sat there with your mother, wondering if young relationships last. Our first date I made shapes with I just keep calling on the help of my peers, but their success makes me distressed. Things will be better when I disappear, bouncing from city to state. Nothing feels great, I'm a committed disgrace. If I could get up, hold my chin up, confidence is just a bluff for the weak. Might take a peek in my self-pity to realize it's selfishness for the meek. Just take these pills and makes it better, but withdrawals will make you seize up and tweak. You gotta buy it every month, we change the brand, it's more expensive this week. I'll hold my chin up, keep this grin up like my mother, she can worry like me. But if I have you, life is worth it, love is more than a contagious disease. I think of you, I think of me, a family, is this another pipe dream? But if these dreams mean anything, I'm gonna think whatever I want to think. I just can't convince myself to look. Why can't I be strong in the place where you read your books? I just can't rely on happenstance. Didn't say goodbye before you died, I should've took that chance. But you'll never leave me, no, my heart is bleeding, and I know this feeling's not fleeting. Your hugs were the best thing, just wrapped up in your strength. I'd give up to be there right now. I just want you back, we all want that. I just wish that you hadn't forgotten. I hate this disease, I hate human beings. We fall apart before we get broken. I just can't believe you're not here with me. We should be out back sitting underneath that willow tree. You could talk and I'd be listening. I didn't take the time to read your mind before you forgot me. Okay. But you'll never leave me, no, my heart is bleeding, and I know this feeling's not fleeting. Your hugs were the best thing, just wrapped up in your strength. I'd give up to be there right now. I just want you back, we all want that. I just wish that you hadn't forgotten. I hate this disease, I hate human beings. We fall apart before we get broken. Lock myself in my...
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Ross with Schu Bros Unfiltered, coming to you live. We are here on a Thursday night. We have a very special guest coming up, but first, I got to introduce the one, the only, the talented, the fabulous Mr. Kyle. How are you doing tonight, Kyle?
Wait, you're saying all that about me? I thought you were going to talk that about our guest. Wow, I'm shocked, amazed, and flabbergasted that you were being nice to me for a change. It's weird. I don't know what to do with that.
It's like in high school when you called the fat guy
great,
tiny.
Oh, yeah, okay. That makes Can you tell we're brothers, people? So, yeah, I'm doing great tonight. Got a lot of chores done for our gender reveal Saturday, so looking forward to that. My wife and I are going to announce to the world via Zoom and Facebook Live and whatever else people are wanting to tune in on what the sex of our baby is going to be. I'm team boy, she's team girl. We'll see what happens.
Well, yeah, we have announced. I was going to say, this might be the first time we've got that announcement. So with that being said, guys, it is Thursday night. It is April 29th, or April 30th, excuse me, which means that as of midnight tonight, if you are locked in your home in Texas, you can go outside. It's going to be amazing. Yes, the stay-at-home order does expire tonight in Texas, so hopefully tomorrow we'll get back to some semblance of normality. That, once again, that doesn't mean that if you feel like you need to take extra precautions, that you shouldn't take extra precautions. And you know what? We have a guest who I think has some opinions on that, so we're going to go ahead and bring in Miss Virginia Kruta of the Daily Caller. Miss Virginia, how are you today?
I am doing well. I'm kind of jealous of the fact that Texas is reopening tomorrow, or tonight actually, because I'm currently in the People's Republic of Illinois, and we have some time left on the clock. Um, well, JB Pritzker, our governor, has decided that it's kind of like it's watching New York, but a couple of days later. Because Andrew Cuomo is apparently of the opinion that everyone in the state of New York lives at 42nd and Broadway. And J.B. Pritzker is apparently of the opinion that most of us live in Chicago and are touching everything on public transportation and touching all the same elevator buttons and hand railings. And the reality is, those of us who own our own cars and simply go to work and grocery stores and stuff, we just don't have that kind of interaction with the general public, especially with kids out of school. We don't have that kind of contact with that many people on a daily basis. And so you're not going to see the kind of spikes here that you would, because I'm 10 minutes maybe from St. Louis. So I am southern Illinois, and we, just a small area. Our entire zip code has had 12 cases in 6 weeks. So I'm thinking that we're probably going to be okay here, but I could be wrong.
You might survive it, huh?
So, yeah, no, I'm. That's not to say, like you said, it's not to say you shouldn't be worried or you shouldn't take extra precautions if you think that you need to. But I think that we're getting to the point where the whole idea behind the shutdowns was to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed, and we are now laying off hospital workers. So I'm thinking that is a suggestion, at least, that the pendulum has swung a bit too far. But again, I'm not the person making these decisions, and I understand that when you are that person and you make a decision and somebody dies, you feel like that's on your head. But at the same time, the stress is being caused by the stay-at-home orders, especially when the people don't feel that they're necessary. You see spikes in domestic abuse and in depression, and people who are, had perfectly good jobs and were doing okay and getting by, and now they're not because the government told them they're not allowed to work. Not that they can't do the job. No, you're just not allowed to. Okay, well, now what? And that's kind of what we're seeing in this area. You're not seeing a lot of people who are really afraid they're going to get sick. More people are afraid that they're not going to be able to, last another 2 weeks with their small business shut down, or, with dad not having a job or mom not having a job. So that's where we are. We're not in the city, so it's a lot different.
Now, of course, you are a writer for the Daily Caller, which is founded by Tucker Carlson, one of the largest conservative news publication sites in the nation. You're one of the fastest growing, one of the biggest. So what is it like writing for such a major publication? I mean, that so many people are going to read day in, day out.
Well, for me, I kind of got there in baby steps. I was telling you before we went to air, I started out writing commentary for Dana Lash, and I just did it for the exposure. She's a friend of mine, and I was like, okay, look, she's got a nationally syndicated show. People are going to see my stuff, and I did a couple hits on her radio show based on reporting I did for her, and I really enjoyed it. And so after that, I moved to Independent Journal Review, or IJR, for a couple of years, and then when they started to not do as well, they had some trouble affording their reporting staff, and I was let go with about 15 other people on the same day. And we ended up, I had a couple of friends who were already working at the Daily Caller, and they made a couple phone calls, and that was pretty much it. I was lucky to have that. And it's just, I like being able to reach that many people. I like being able to work with it. I mean, we have the best team and the best newsroom that anybody could imagine. I really like the people that I work with on a daily basis. And it's like, you think about reporting and people fighting over scoops and we don't really do that. You see people, sending messages and like, here's something that could help with the story I know you're working on. And people do that. So it's really a team kind of environment. And we have a few military veterans on staff, and I think that plays into it because there's that whole kind of we're all brothers in the same foxhole kind of deal is very much in the newsroom. And I feel that even though I'm working from home, I don't work in DC and everybody else does. So it's nice to have that connection even if you're not in the same room as everybody else.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, with being from the Daily Caller, how often do you get confused with the Daily Wire? I'm sure that's a pretty much every moment conversation.
That actually happened about a week ago. Somebody tweeted they were mad at us about something, and they tagged us in the tweet, but the article they linked to was the Daily Wire, and we're like, we didn't do that. And my response was, well, I know we all look alike to you, but because it's one of those, like, I mean, I'm sure we get mixed up with the Daily Beast, although not quite as often because they're not conservative, but it's just, oh, it starts with Daily, they must all be the same. We're not the Daily Show, we're not the no. But yeah, it does happen, and we just pretty much, depending on where it's coming from, we'll just joke back at them like, no, that's not us. You guys are idiots. But nice try.
It's like while we respect Ben Shapiro and all his underlings over there, that ain't us.
It's like, it reminds me of the Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. Nope. Ding. Thank you for playing. No, that's not us. Try again.
So, I mean, the first big story I want to broach with you is a story you talked about today on the Daily Caller, a story you wrote that was published today. I'm sure you worked on it for some time, but it involves Joe Biden and the allegations being made against him by Tara Reade. So, what are your understandings of these allegations at this moment? Where do you think they stand in the terms of credibility? And then, as a follow-up, maybe you could just work it in, is why do you think the Biden camp is refusing to talk about it?
Well, one, I believe that Biden is going to be on Morning Joe tomorrow, specifically to address this. So I think he is hedging, and he's going to talk about it tomorrow. I don't know what he'll say. I'm going to be watching because I'm interested. But from what I understand, she has made these accusations that amount to assault. She has several people who back up not only that she says this happened, but she told them at the time. So that's, right now we are, in terms of credibility, about 3 steps ahead of you'll remember Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who accused Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. And what I think is interesting, and what I've written about a couple of times, is that Christine Blasey Ford was treated as a hero when she came forward, even though she couldn't remember when it happened. She couldn't remember where it happened. The people she said were with her don't remember anything. She never told anybody at the time. In fact, she didn't tell anybody until 2 weeks after he was listed as a possible nominee. So, and that's not to say that we shouldn't take accusations like that seriously. When Ford came forward, we should take an accusation like that seriously. However, we should also ask for evidence if you're going to destroy someone's livelihood, destroy someone's life. And I feel the same way about Biden. However, I think Tara Reade has provided at least a window into that. And I don't understand why there are people who thought we should investigate Ford's allegations and are not concerned at all with investigating Reed's.
Well,
So
yeah, and I find it interesting that today we have Nancy Pelosi who comes out and says, "Well, we ought to
Stole
we
my
ought to
question.
listen, but at the same time, there's due process." It's like, well, where was the due process 2 years ago?
Right.
Where was due process when it was Christine Blasey Ford? When was it okay? We can believe the accusation, but yet we need evidence and we need corroboration. With Christine Blasey Ford, we were deemed racist, sexist, homophobe, whatever, for even suggesting that she could possibly not be telling 100% the truth. And with Tara Reid, now I see people on the left with the little blue cap on their Twitter signature who are telling us, well, she's recanted and she's changed her story. Well, Christine Blasey Ford changed her story several times.
right. And so, I don't know that. The thing is, changing your story is really not as big a tell, I think, as some of the other things that happen. But what I'm interested in, I'm watching what the Biden campaign is doing right now. And they sent people from the campaign to University of Delaware to go through his records. Now, these are the records that Reid has asked to be unsealed. These are from his time in the Senate. They were public records and they were privatized. And she says there may be a copy of her complaint in there. She wants them publicized again, or she wants them made, the paperwork there made, the documents there made public, and the Biden campaign is not allowing it. And now they've sent someone to go through it. So to me, that says he knows there might be something there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense like that.
Doesn't mean that, and I'm not saying that Tara Reid is definitely telling the truth, because I don't know. I can't say that, but I think that she has presented a credible case based on the number of people who are corroborating it, and it's worth an investigation. And it's certainly worth as much of an investigation as anyone accusing Kavanaugh was worth. So that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, I think it's very weird that we're seeing such a downplay of this. The media didn't want to cover it at all. The New York Times begrudgingly covered it. And now, like y'all posted yesterday, the DC police have closed the investigation with little to no effort put into it. It's just, to me, it seems like they're just trying to cover it up and make it go away in order for Joe Biden to not have any blemishes on his record. I mean, he's got plenty when it comes to politics in general, at least from a conservative values reasoning, and he's flip-flopped on a few things here and there over the years, but it just seems like they're doing everything in their power to diminish this as best as possible. And even like Ross was talking about earlier, Nancy Pelosi goes up and just, kind of almost lectures the people about lecturing her on it, and then just immediately ends the press conference and walks away. So that's, to me, it's just really something. If there's a lot of smoke here, so I'm betting there's a fire somewhere.
Pelosi has been really touchy lately. I don't know if you saw on Sunday, she was on with Jake Tapper, and he said something about maybe she and Chuck Schumer had misjudged the last coronavirus relief bill. Like, they were pushing for state and local funding and they didn't get it, and they promised it on the next one, and now Mitch McConnell is like, I don't want to bail out states that don't deserve it, etc. My state being one of them, and I'm with him on that, but that's a different thing altogether. But she was like, she said, she basically told him, now hold on a minute, don't she told him to slow down and to stop, pushing her. And I'm like, well, he's asking you questions because that's his job, and they were actually good questions, so maybe you should answer them. She's more interested in doing videos about how Trump's mad that she's got ice cream in her freezer. Nobody cares that she's got ice cream in her freezer.
She had to look at the teleprompter on that. You notice during the middle of the recording, she takes a momentary pause, looks down, and then it's like it's a 20-second spot of you asking for money. You should have this so down. I mean, how long have you been in Congress? How many times have you done this exact same video?
I think this was just a typical, slip of the tongue. And so I'm not really hammering her on this one, but she did accidentally say to Nicole Wallace that she had Lysol in her freezer, and I got a kick out of that. She meant to say it's better to have ice cream in your freezer than Lysol in your lungs, which, if you're a Democrat, that's funny. But so it's like, and she accidentally said, it's better to, he's saying I have Lysol in my freezer, and then she got confused and started over. It was great.
So I want to shift to another topic real quick, because I mean, there's so much going on at the moment, and we brought up coronavirus a little bit, and we brought up Tara Reid, but there's a lot else going on. Today, De Blasio has for the first time announced that they are going to deep clean the subways in New York City. So for the last 6 weeks, the New York subways have been wide open, running every day as an essential service for the people of New York. Even though people in New York couldn't leave their homes, they could ride the subway. So, which we've categorically seen that the New York subway system is fairly dirty. Why do you think it took so long for them to make this decision?
Yeah, I kind of half joked about that. Like, this is something, this should have been like job one. But I would say this. I think that the subway is not just used by the average person. The essential workers are using it too. So I can understand why it's still running, because you have to, there are nurses and doctors that's how they get to work, and or hospital sanitation workers, hospital food workers, take your pick. There are plenty of essential workers who take the subway on a regular basis. So I'm not saying they should have closed it. And as from what I understand, they were sanitizing it on a daily basis, but now there is an additional step being added to it. So I still think that should have been job one. Like, if you realize that everybody's going to be in this place, maybe you sanitize it more often. Maybe you take precautions, like have a hand sanitizer installed as you're walking onto the, it's not too difficult to have one of those, like the ones that were on the wall in the bathroom, where you just push the button and it comes. Not too hard to install that to the inside of a, subway car. Things like that they could have done. But all of it's Monday morning quarterbacking, because we don't know. We don't know how much of a difference that made. We don't know how much of a difference, Mayor de Blasio telling everybody to go to the movie theaters on March 2nd. We don't know what made the difference in New York.
We saw the video yesterday of him walking through the park when he had somebody drive him to the park so he could go walk through the park, and the guy following him saying, this is the epitome of non-essential travel. This is the epitome of, you don't need to be out here. You have your own places to go. You can go somewhere close to your house. Why are you over here?
Right. And I agree with that. I would say this, though, the people who were really mad about that, to a certain degree, I think he was doing what he was supposed to, because he and his wife both had masks on. The only people they were in close contact with were each other. And I assume if they live in the same house and they happen to be close to each other outside, that's not really any different. It'd be like, me going outside with my 6-year-old. We lived in the same house. We're not exposing each other any differently outside than inside, except maybe less so. But so I didn't really have a problem with him being outside, especially because he was wearing a mask and he was, staying away from anybody who wasn't his wife. But I would agree that he probably could have done that at home instead of making a show of it. And that has kind of gotten him into more trouble than anything else. I mean, the day before they closed everything down, he was, crossing town to go to the gym. And he can't, he's kind of like Trump in the way that sometimes he just can't get out of his own way. And I've said this before, and de Blasio is kind of shown to be the same way. Maybe it's a New York thing, but you guys are familiar with the comedian Ron White?
Yes.
And you know the bit he
Call
does
me
about
tater
That's
salad.
tater salad down here in Texas.
the bit he does about being drunk in public, and
I wasn't drunk in
he
public. I
says
was drunk in a bar.
They threw me into public.
right. Well, the bit that I'm talking about though is when he says, they told me I had the right to remain silent. I had the right, but I did not have the ability.
That sounds
And
like
that-
Ross.
and to me, I mean, that's the same problem I have, to be honest. But it's and I was born in New York. What do you know? Uh, but I find that the president runs into that occasionally, where he probably should be quiet, but he keeps talking because either he's enjoying himself or he thinks he can make a point that he's just not, like he just can't land the plane. And but De Blasio does it too. And I think a lot of politicians really do that. They say things, they keep talking when they when they should just shut up.
Now, was it De Blasio or Como that made the tweet about the Jewish population the other day?
You, and that was actually what I was thinking of when he should have shut up.
Should just shut the hell up. I mean, call out people. Do
Yeah.
not focus on an individual group of people.
Yeah,
That
right.
was that a lot of people got really upset.
At this funeral, then you should be, if you were at this funeral, then you shouldn't have been out. If he had done it that way, that would be different. But yeah, and I will say, I still think that there's going to be some behind the scenes wizardry, and somebody is going to push Andrew Cuomo as the presidential nominee. I don't think he's going to take it. He's said a couple of times that he's got no interest in it. He doesn't want to be VP, which he can't because he's not a woman. But he doesn't want to be president either.
Mhm.
I think it's going to be interesting. This is the most bizarre presidential campaign I've ever seen. You got people running for vice president. You got a presidential candidate who's barely visible, and some of that's because of coronavirus. But
That's because he's becoming senile, or he has a stuttering issue, which is a known issue. He has a stuttering issue, and he just can't form a coherent sentence.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is there are plenty of people who have issues with stuttering, and you can overcome it. But as my good friend Peter Hasson said on Tucker Carlson's show like a month ago, stuttering doesn't cause you to say things that aren't true.
They also don't cause you to say very racist things.
No, it might cause you to have a difficulty getting something out, or stumble getting a sentence together constructed the proper way, or however, there are certain things that it affects and certain things that it doesn't. But your ability to tell the truth is not one of them. So that would be the issue, because somebody said today, Joe Biden has a very complicated relationship with the truth. And I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Well, I like that with Biden. We're now to believe that he's this progressive icon, that he's been this civil rights leader, and that he was involved in all of these different women's rights and civil rights. When, just a couple months ago, he was getting hammered because Kamala Harris rightly pointed out that he opposed busing. And there's, the whole thing where we saw him in the Clarence Thomas trials with Anita Hill, where we saw how he treated, women there, and how he's had some, I mean, I don't know what to think readily about the Tara Reade allegations, because there is, I'm still on the side of it that we need, he needs evidence, and he gets a chance to defend himself and blah, blah, blah. Now, him taking so long to speak out about it and not thoroughly coming out and just denying it as vehemently as he could. Everybody made fun of Brett Kavanaugh because he, slamming the table and almost in tears over these allegations, because he was truly upset about it. He knew it wasn't true. He knew in his heart that he didn't do it. He believed that he didn't do it. I don't know whether it was true or not, but he believes that he's innocent. So he was vehemently, and we had Saturday Night Live skits about that. But we've seen a history of Biden with uncomfortable moments with women. Even to the point where a state representative in Arizona said that he came up behind her and sniffed his hair and massaged her shoulders without her consent. Okay, that's creepy, not sexual assault, but it's creepy.
I mean, it borders sexual harassment, though. Unwanted touching.
Right. Well, I agree with that. What I would say is that Joe Biden was raised in an era when that was okay, but he apparently wasn't paying attention to what was going on in all the time since, because the world has changed, and I don't know if being in Congress isolated him from that. I don't know, but he should have realized that it wasn't okay now.
But
And
yeah, but I
that's
mean, it's not just about the women thing. I mean, he also has issues. He likes to come out and say that, he's popular amongst the African American voters and things of that nature. But he doesn't have the greatest history when it comes to civil rights. And I think it's being downplayed. I think a lot of people are trying to just sweep it under the rug right now. But he openly said that he marched on Selma when there's absolutely no proof he did any of that. He says that he was trying to meet with Nelson Mandela when he wasn't even in the same place as Nelson Mandela. I mean, as you said,
that.
stuttering doesn't cause you to lie. And these are just
Right.
outright lies. I mean, he's just fabricating. What's the word? He's fabricating his story, and he's elaborating it to make him seem more progressive than I feel he really is.
Well, and some of that is what's really interesting to me. Simone Sanders, I don't know if you know who she is. She's his communications. Um, she worked for Bernie Sanders in 2016. And prior to the 2016 election, she was famous for going on national television and saying it was time to get the old white men out of politics. And since then, she's worked for both Sanders and Biden, which is just amusing to me, all by itself. But she may be advising Biden in that direction. So, and to be fair, there are some people who aren't buying it, and there are some people who are. There are plenty. What I think is the main reason I think the African American community is so um, satisfied with him, I guess, is that he appears at least more moderate than the alternatives. And if you look at the Black community, especially on social issues, they tend to be more conservative than the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And so they like Biden because, one, they know him. Two, he was the number one guy for Barack Obama. And three, he doesn't check off some of those progressive boxes that they're not quite ready for. And so that's why I think he does so well. Even though he might have a history, they're able to look at that and say, yeah, but his more recent history lines up with what I believe. And so they don't take such a long view of
Do
his
you
career.
think, like in the 2016 election, we'll see again a not strong turnout from the African American community in the general election? Because I mean that was a big difference between 2016 and 2012 and 2008 was the amount of the African American population that came out to vote was much decreased in 2016 because they just weren't excited about Hillary. There wasn't that it wasn't
Right.
we need to get out and vote for her.
I don't know. I think that Biden is more popular than she is, for sure. He's just more likable than she is.
I think a rock is more likable than she is.
Well,
And
yeah,
he means the
there's that.
country, not an actual physical rock.
No, I meant like a stone that you pick up
Oh,
off the street.
I was
A
making
rock.
it worse because I would think the country would be worse, but okay.
Yeah,
But-
I mean, either way works though.
Yeah. So, but I think he's just more likable, and a lot of it hinges on who he picks for his vice presidential nominee. Because if you look at and you were asking me before about The View because I cover that show a lot, but they've talked about it a number of times, and Sonny Hostin in particular is of the opinion that Biden needs to pick a black woman. And the reason that he needs to pick a black woman is that, especially if coronavirus is still an issue, and we already know that the impact on the black community is higher statistically, as far as spread of the disease and complications and everything else. She was saying that he needed to pick a black woman because black women were going to be the ones risking their lives to vote for him. And then, of course, they have Stacey Abrams on, despite her busy schedule as the imaginary governor of Georgia. And she was talking about how she was
Thank you so much.
pick a, like, I don't even know. So there's going to be people who are mad if he doesn't pick a black woman. And then there are going to be people mad if he doesn't pick a moderate. And then there are going to be people mad if he doesn't pick a far left progressive. And the big problem he has is that now that Tara Reid is credible, or at least appears to be so, the Bernie Bros hate him even more. Because they were going to be the ones that two things are happening. One, the conservative never Trumpers who thought Trump was awful now have a reason to believe Biden might be just as bad. And the Bernie Bros have a reason to say, screw you, we told you to pick Bernie and not show up. So it really depends on who he picks and whether or not he can bounce back from Tara Reid, I think, is going to be what determines what happens next.
So we've got a few comments from the audience.
Right.
First one comes, the sad thing is even if it's requiring a trial, a jury would find Sleepy Joe incompetent for his own defense because he can't remember 5 minutes ago, let alone years. And then the other one is the reason the black people love him is because he's on quote saying this. It's his leg hair. They just love his leg hair. So
yeah,
it's blonde.
Puts that in the pool, man. It's like a shiny lure to fish.
That will never not be creepy.
Never. that and some of the pictures he has with little girls is just like trying to kiss them, just like, like damn.
No.
So my next question for you is, I see on your timeline, or at least on your Twitter feed, that you're finally starting to write a book, and you're about 3 chapters deep into it now. Do you have a working title yet, or do you have a kind of a flow for it, or is it just kind of as you go?
Well, I was talking about this before we went to air. I'm working on a kind of a fictionalized version of my grandfather's story at the Battle of the Bulge. He was there in 1944 in Bastogne, and he was part of a group called Team Snafu, which was an ad hoc unit kind of cobbled together right there at the last minute and only existed for about 6 weeks. But there's not anything written about it because there was never a written roster. It was all based on one written order from the generals to a colonel giving him blanket permission to do something with the stragglers as they came into Bastogne. So these were guys whose units had been blown apart around them, and just a few guys made it into the town and then managed to get themselves surrounded and trapped with the 101st. So
Did you say snafu?
Yeah. Yep. Means
Was that
exactly what it does.
exactly what I think it does? Okay. For our non-military members, situation normal, all blanked up.
Yeah.
That's at least that's the definition I was told.
Well,
It's like the real meaning of hua, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
She knows.
they were supposed to be just a team to help supply reinforcements, and they got nicknamed Snafu, and it stuck. So
Surprising that kind of stuff was going on way back when in the 40s.
Yeah, we didn't invent acronyms.
True.
Have you ever heard the term BAM, like a BAM, to refer to a female Marine?
Guess I've heard the word BAM before, but not towards a female Marine.
No, they did this. This was also in the 40s, and it was based on the fact that in the back of the trucks where they had the bench seats, according to regulations, 8 men could sit on that seat. But if it was females, only 7 could sit there because they were trying to make the women more comfortable. This was, 1940s. They were trying to be generous and give them a little bit of space instead of cramming them in there. And of course, the Marines took that the opposite way and assumed that they were giving the women more space because they needed it. And so BAM stands for Big Ass Marine because it was
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Space.
So yeah, we so for the listeners who we said Hua. There's an original meaning to Hua. If for most military people, they know what the new version of Hua is. It's supposed to be like, oh, everything's great. Oh yeah, rally around.
Heard, understood,
Sure.
acknowledged.
Head up ass is another way of saying it.
That's the original and still the best.
Medical. We didn't get head up ass. We got correct your craniorectal infarction.
We got stop that, Private.
That's for you medically terminology literate people.
So our drill sergeants, because they weren't, I went to basic in 2008 where they weren't allowed to touch you, but if you touched any portion of their uniform, then that rule, it was like, oh, you touched them first. So they would take their drill sergeant hats, which are giant frisbees in real life, and they'd fling them at you, and if it hit you, if you turned around and saw that had hit you in the back, a drill sergeant was following right behind it to tackle you or something. And it was their excuse for, oh, well, he touched me. Well, yeah, I did, but only because you forced me to.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, I went through training in '99, so a long time before that. But this was when they had just passed the regulations where they were not allowed to smoke in front of the trainees because that would have made them jealous, which I didn't care. I mean, I didn't smoke, so it didn't bother me. And so they would all chew tobacco, but they weren't supposed to do that in front of us either. And so we had this giant 6'1" MP who would like stand in the middle of the classroom, and he'd be talking to us, and then in the middle of a sentence he'd walk into the office and then he'd come back out. We all knew he was going in there to spit, but it was just like, why are you even bothering with this?
We had a drill sergeant who literally skateboarded to the barracks every morning just to and he came in with his brand new iPhone because this is 2008 when the first iPhone came out. So he went and got it, and he's like, hey guys, check this out, look what I can do with my phone. We're all just sitting there like, yeah, you suck right now.
It wasn't, cell phones weren't ubiquitous at that point, so it wasn't like half people there didn't even have cell phones when they got there, and most of them, none of it was really a thing at that point. But my other drill sergeant, he was nuts. He was a Ranger Pathfinder. If there was a tab you could earn, he had it. But he was like 5'5" and 150 pounds. He was this little tiny guy. I could look him in the forehead. I mean, and I'm not tall, so he was a trip though, man. He was tough as nails. One time when he was mad at some of the guys in the platoon, so he brought his 15-year-old son in and had the son challenge the other guys in the platoon to a push-up contest. Son wiped the floor with him. It was pretty impressive.
So we had a drill sergeant named Drill Sergeant Payne, and he embodied that name as best he could.
Yeah.
In front of formation, he'd be out there on the pull-up rack, and he'd be doing pull-ups, no big deal. One arm pull-up, no big deal. Other arm pull-up, no big deal. He put his feet straight out in front of him, just keep racking out pull-ups, and we're just sitting there going, man, I don't want to get on the wrong side of him. But yeah, he was another one of those kind of short, squat guys, and you knew that if you tangled with him, things weren't going to end well for you.
He yelled one time. The little guy yelled at me one time. We were on a company run the first week of training, and the girl in front of me, I could tell she was going to fall out, and so I backed off her just a little bit. And he's like, get up there. And so I did, and then she fell out, and I tripped over her, and I must have said something impolite as I hit the ground. And he told me that we were going to have a counseling statement afterward. And then I rolled down my sock, and my ankle swelled up. Like as I was rolling the sock down, my ankle is turning colors and ballooning up. And then he said something that was not polite and asked me if I could walk. And I stood up and I put weight on it, and I realized it wasn't broken. And so I took a chance, and we were going really slow. And so I made it the quarter mile back to the company area. And then he didn't talk to me after that. Like he didn't, he never gave me the counseling statement. I guess he figured if I was going to stand up and take it, that it'd be all right.
So,
but I didn't.
What was your MOS? What was your job? What branch of the service were you in for the listeners?
For the first 5 years, I was a reservist and I was admin specialist. If you've watched MASH, I was radar. Running errands, filing paperwork, getting people to sign things, that kind of stuff. And then when I went back on active duty, which was about 2005, I went to X-ray school in Fort Sam Houston, which is now Joint Base Lackland, or part of Joint Base Lackland. In San Antonio, and I was there for about 10 months, and I learned, I was trained as a field medic and as an x-ray tech. And then when I got to Fort Leonard Wood, they trained me to do CT scans too, and MRI.
Leonard
and
Wood.
That was,
Leonard Wood. Both of us went there for basic.
and you ain't training. Uh, yeah, no, I was there, and I was at Leonard Wood from 06 to when I got out in 2010. So
Hey, we were both there during
Yeah.
that time, so hey, we made.
I was there in 08, so locked in the little basic training.
I was there in
So
09.
the funniest part about Leonard Wood to me was that when you're done with basic training and you're leaving, you realize how close the barracks for basic training are to the main gate, and you're just like, oh
Yeah.
crap, I could have left this entire time. I thought we were way back, because when you get there and you're in basic training, they don't. When you go to your unit, they make you cover your face and you can't look out and see where. I think they just drive you around in circles for 30 or 40 minutes, just so you don't know where the hell you are and discombobulate you.
Well, and you might have actually run, if you ever went to sick call. I worked at the CTMC for a long time.
I did.
Because I had my national registry, which X-ray techs have to take like a national certification. It's like nursing, where you have a certification exam that you can take, and once you've been through the Army school, that's good enough for the Army. So you don't have to have your national certification to work as an X-ray tech in the Army. But if you ever wanted to use it outside, then you have to get that certification. And so I got certified in about a month after I graduated from my school. And because I was certified, I could train students. And so they put me out at the troop clinic because I was allowed to see, I was allowed to have students out there, which was fun.
I went to sick call because they told me if I went to sick call, I got to go eat at the medical center over there, or at the chow hall for the medical center, and they had good food. So I went over there because they had fat cake, and we weren't allowed to have that at our barracks. So going back to some big topics of the day. So some recent news has come out about General Flynn. We're talking about military, so let's talk about General Flynn. General Flynn now, the FBI has some notes that have come out that said basically the goal of that investigation was either to catch him in a lie somewhere where they could then prosecute him for it, or at least get him fired. So what is your opinion of this situation? Are you under the opinion that Trump should pardon General Flynn, or are you in the opinion that, like me, I kind of think Trump he knows what is going on, and he's not going to pardon Flynn because then it'll look like, oh well, Flynn only got off because of this, and if Trump just lets it play out, Flynn could be exonerated on his own without needing the pardon.
Doesn't he have to be convicted though before Trump can actually pardon him? So at this point, Trump couldn't even pardon him anyway because it's still just an active investigation.
He pled guilty, so technically that is a conviction. So yeah, Trump could pardon him right now. Trump could have pardoned him, 6 months ago. But what I think is going to be more interesting, and I think this is the reason that Trump hasn't done anything. One, up until about this week, Vice President Mike Pence still believed that Flynn had lied to him, and that's why he was fired. So, and Trump has a tendency to not be quite as gracious to the people who he thinks have wronged him, and I think Mike Pence falls under that umbrella. So Trump may have been mad at him on Pence's behalf because he believed that he'd lied. But I think at this point, it would be better for him to not pardon him, not because I think that Flynn will necessarily be exonerated, because the reality is they caught him in a lie. He did lie to the FBI. But I think that he may have already served enough time for the crime he actually committed. So what I think is more likely to happen is that if they're going to use Flynn to uncover what was going on in the FBI, because if he's pardoned, that investigation kind of...
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. The investigation just comes to an end. The FBI then has a reason to bury everything because they don't have a
Right.
the Logan Act no longer applies. There's no longer an active investigation. There's no longer ability for Mike Flynn's team to use discovery. It's all gone. And as long as this keeps going, we keep getting these documents and we keep getting these documents, and it's just making the FBI seem worse and worse.
And if Flynn is the bargaining chip, and they can say, okay, well, we need to figure out what was going on in the FBI because we could be, allowing punishment to continue for a man who might be innocent of XYZ. There's more of a they have more leverage to continue investigating the FBI, I guess is what I'm getting at here. If as long as Flynn is still considered to be guilty and whatnot. So I think it's going to be interesting how it plays out, but I couldn't predict. But I think that's probably why he's not getting a pardon at this point. That's why I wouldn't pardon him yet, because I would want to see. Trump has said from the beginning he wants to see what was going on in the FBI, and this is a really, really convenient way to get at it.
Is that why earlier today or last night Trump tweeted Comey is guilty or something of that nature?
No, I think so. I think that was it. That would be my guess as far as that's concerned.
And what do you think? Because front page of Daily Caller right now. If you go to dailycaller.com for all of our listeners, if you don't read Daily Caller, it's a great source of conservative news. And if you kind of like Tucker Carlson, it pads his bank account. So make sure you go over there and take a look at Daily Caller. And look, there's a lot of conservative news media. There's a lot of different sources. Daily Caller's one of the best. It's been out for a while now. It's pretty consistent. We know who the authors are. We know what they're going to write about. So Daily Caller is a really good source. But right now it's about Peter Strzok, front page, and how the Flynn investigation was ready to be closed and it was ready to be over with, and then Strzok forced them to keep it open. And just wanted to keep digging, so. Do you think there's any possibility we see Lisa Page or Peter Strzok or Mike or Comey or Brennan or any of these guys? Do you think there's any chances we see them brought to some form of justice, or are they just likely to skate?
It really depends on what they find, because based on what we know right now, they were fired. So they did have there were some repercussions for the way that they behaved, regardless of whether or not you think that that's enough. Comey was fired. McCabe was fired. Brennan is no longer a player on that stage. So it is going to be interesting. I do think it will be interesting to see how, for example, CNN responds after this, because McCabe is a regular contributor. MSNBC, I think Brennan has been on multiple times. He's been a contributor there. So it will be interesting to see how more liberal media outlets handle the fact that they gave a platform to the guys who were part of the problem. Of course, they haven't really apologized for giving so much airtime to Michael Avenatti yet, so I'm not really holding my breath on that. But I'm definitely.
He's out of jail. He's going right back to MSNBC. He'll be on Morning Joe next to Joe Biden tomorrow morning.
I doubt it. I think they learned their lesson on Michael Avenatti. And this is actually when the View turns out to be worthwhile. There is a flashback of them talking about Michael Avenatti. And Meghan McCain had the good sense to look nauseous when they were talking about how helpful he'd been, to bringing things to light. And no, he's just attacking the president because he doesn't like him. But she's like, I thought he was scum from the beginning. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. But yeah, no, it's on my bio page at the Daily Caller, and it was kind of a joke because you know how people excuse the fact that they'll subscribe to Playboy. Oh, I just get it for the articles. And so I made a joke play on that, and then on my bio it says I watch The View for the articles because I get so much play out of the dumb things that they say on that show, or for sometimes the smart things that they say on that show. Um, Whoopi Goldberg, you wouldn't expect it, but she's a free speech purist, and so every once in a while she says something that conservatives can really get behind. And Meghan McCain, more often than the others, very staunch Second Amendment supporter, very pro-life. And, do I agree with her all the time? No, but you don't have to agree that, she has it right on some of the things that she talks about. So it is interesting to watch that interaction, and you watch the fact that, every once in a while things just go, everybody just blows up at once, and it makes for good TV. So it's fun to kind of watch for that. But and then there are days that I just yell at my TV for an hour. So, it's it comes and it goes.
Well, what else is in the news that we need to talk about? There's so much going on. Again, I want to mention for all of you guys that are watching, if you live in Texas, congratulations, you get out of this tomorrow. We've
Midnight tonight, baby, going on a run.
we scheduled a baseball game for Saturday morning because everybody's like, God, we just need to get outside. And one of the guys in our office is like, don't y'all know that's too? He's like, dude, we can play baseball with more than 6 feet between us. I promise you, we can be more than 6 feet away from each other playing baseball. We do not need to be that close to play baseball with each other. But Miss Virginia, what other topics what's going on in conservative world that we just aren't aware of right now? There's so much that it's data overload.
I think that a lot of what's being covered, what I think is interesting, especially, I'm going to go back to coronavirus for a second, because everybody's talking about the need to keep testing and the need to keep testing, and they're pushing the diagnostic test, which I'm wondering if it might be, especially if you look at the number of people who may have been asymptomatic and actually already had this virus, if it wouldn't be more effective to push the antibody test. Because from what I'm understanding, the antibody test is a little bit more less likely to give a false positive, I guess, than the and you don't have to have symptoms. Anybody can take this test. It's just a blood test, and it's not complicated, not painful, any more painful than any other blood test. And it's going to tell you. Now, having antibodies doesn't mean you're immune. Obviously, we don't know enough about this to get that far, but I think it would be interesting to see if more people were pushing that than the diagnostic test, because continuing to test the diagnostic test is good if you have people who have symptoms, but if you're just trying to figure out who's asymptomatic, that's not really going to help you, as far as that's concerned. So I don't know. I think that we should be pushing, if we're going to push any testing, that it should be more toward the antibody testing. And I think that it's good that we're working on a vaccine. I think that now there's a debate of whether it should be mandatory or not, and there are those that say that it should be, and I'm not in that camp. I think
me and Ross have had many discussions on mandatory vaccines or not.
No,
That's a sticking point for us.
Yeah, I'm not a mandatory vaccine person. I think that vaccines as a rule are beneficial to society. My kids are all vaccinated. There are certain vaccines that they won't be getting. Like my daughter's 15, she's not going to get the HPV vaccine because there are too many side effects associated with it. And realistically, her greatest risk would be from being promiscuous, and she's not. And and she knows that risk. She knows that, hey, if you behave in this fashion, you put yourself at risk for a number of things, not just that. And so you need to make smart decisions. And it's just I think that it should be a choice. It's liberty is a dangerous thing, but it's also fragile, and
That's yeah.
you can break you can break it with a vaccine mandate. You can break it with stay-at-home orders that are indefinite, and you can, there are a lot of things that can chip away at your liberty. And I tweeted this a couple weeks ago. I said, we would do well to remember that our founding fathers fought a revolution for liberty. They didn't they didn't fight a revolution for safety. They fought a revolution for liberty.
Ben Franklin is always great for a quote, and the Ben Franklin quote is those who would trade safety for liberty deserve neither. And
Oh, see, I go to Sam Adams for that. It's, I can't remember how it starts, but he says, if you prefer if you prefer wealth rather than liberty, if you basically if you would rather have security than the animating contest of freedom, depart from us in peace. We ask not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hands that feed you, and may your chains rest lightly upon you, and may prosperity forget that you were our countrymen. I mean,
damn,
he is
that's
brutal.
getting after it right there. I mean, and then I mean, because I've been having this conversation a lot. I'm a big Friedman fan. I like Milton Friedman. I like Chicago School of Economics. I like laissez-faire, economic theory. And I was having this conversation the other day. A big thing that's come up now is Mitch McConnell is pushing that companies that do open back from the COVID-19 pandemic should be exempted from liability if their employees or customers were to contract COVID-19 from their place of employment. I personally think that as a conservative, we should be against that, because laissez-faire economics means laissez-faire economics. It means the government does not get involved in the economic system. And to me, okay, if you own a business, you all understand the risk, you understand the possibility, you now make your adaptations and you go back to work if you choose to. And we've had this conversation with other people who said, oh, we don't have a choice, blah, blah. No. There's always a choice in this country. You cannot go to work. You cannot open your business back up. You can choose not to do things. You can choose to do whatever you prefer to do. But if you're going to do so, you have to be able to do so safely. You have to be able to let people come into your business and feel like they can do so safely. I don't think the government should be in a place of exempting any company from liability, and mostly for the reason of, if we do it now for this, what do we do it for next time? And then what do we do it for the time after that? And then how many times do we take this down the road?
The only thing that I would worry about, especially because this is a pandemic. It's in every state. It's in just about every county in the country. I mean, there are very few counties that have zero impact from this. So when you look at that, you consider it's everywhere anyway. The ability to contact trace is pretty much obliterated. So the idea that you could say, that I got this disease from this specific business, it almost doesn't exist at this point. You might have a hot spot like you see places where there's a hot spot at a nursing home and et cetera. But here's the question: are we going to allow the families of people who might have died in a nursing home to sue for wrongful death over this? Because, like, for example, my grandfather passed away on Easter Sunday. He was 96 years old. He was a World War II veteran, served on Guam, and this is my other grandfather. And he was in a nursing home, and he was on hospice care. He did not die of coronavirus, but had he, would I have been able to sue for wrongful death? He was already on hospice care. He was 96 years old. He had dementia, late stage. So where do you draw the line, and who can sue and who can't? And how realistic is it that you could contact trace to the point where any lawsuit would get past "this is ridiculous" from a judge? So I'm kind of on the fence on that one, because I can see both sides of it. I think that if you come out ahead of time and say, this is a pandemic, This is not something that a business is. No, no, I think that if you can prove a business is actively not taking precautions, then you could say, this business put me at risk and they did so intentionally. That's where I think the lawsuits would be effective or actually worth pursuing. But if you're talking about a business that has they've got the tape on the floor that says, here's where you stand 6 feet apart, here's where you can stand when you're talking to the register. We've got plexiglass up to protect people. We're all of our employees are wearing masks and gloves. They've taken every precaution and somebody still gets sick. It's not necessary. You can't say that the business is at fault.
That's the standard of reasonable accommodation. As long as you're making good faith efforts to, I mean, if a guy walks into Lowe's today or Walmart and trips on his own 2 feet and hits his head on a counter, is that Walmart's fault or is that his own fault? As long as Walmart didn't place something in the way that caused him to fall, then it's not really Walmart's fault. And I agree with you there. I just don't think that the government should be in the position of exempting somebody from liability because for me.
Now, if Mitch, see, I don't know what he's saying though. If Mitch McConnell is saying you can't sue the business simply because you got the disease and you visited that business, and so obviously it's their fault. If he's saying that I don't have necessarily a problem with, because he may be assuming there will be frivolous lawsuits or people trying to blame anybody but themselves, when the reality is they took a risk when they left their house.
Well, of course.
You know,
I guess for me, it's just if a lot I talk about with a lot of the Republicans I see, and I consider myself a conservative, not a Republican, is that if we're going to preach that the government should stay out of the economy, then we should practice that the government should stay fully out of the economy. I don't want the government getting involved with gun manufacturers and things of that nature, so I don't want them getting involved with my ice cream companies or where I buy anything from. And I have the same argument when it comes to spending, because as being a guy with an economics background and liking to study economics and being for a more sound fiscal policy, it always seems like, we had the Tea Party in 08 through 16, but then as soon as Trump got elected, it was okay for the Republicans to spend money like crazy. And we still have Rand Paul, and we have Justin Amash and Chip Roy and a few other guys that are still pounding the fiscal conservative table. But all of a sudden, a lot of guys who were fiscal conservatives in for 8 years shut up. They got real quiet when Trump increased the budget.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I have this happened to me actually when the Tea Party was kind of at its height. I made some comment about Obama raising the debt ceiling, and they said, "Where were you when Ronald Reagan raised the debt ceiling 9 times?" I'm like, "Well, I was 9 when he left office, so let me tell you how I felt about it then." Like I don't know, but I think, to an extent, that's correct. Like, Democrats aren't worried about the deficit until it's a Republican spending the money. You're going to see that partisan divide, and the reality is government exists for one reason and one reason alone, and that's to figure out how to spend your money so that they can keep asking for more of it. So it really, do I agree with all the spending? No. But do I know that because of where the power divide is, that a lot of the spending is going at least toward things I can support? More so, yes, now than. And so I think that is probably the argument that people are making to justify support for that. But at the same time, some of the spending that we're talking about, like, I'm not a huge fan of the stimulus packages that just passed, but I also understand that these are meant to be temporary measures, and when the government forces you out of business, then there is a legitimate case for the government making up that loss, because the only reason that you don't have it is that the government took it in the first place, took your ability to work, your ability to what have you. And you were talking about, yes, there's always a choice. And I would partially agree with that, but my my husband's family owns a small business, and if they had been forced to close, that wouldn't have been a choice. They could choose to stay open, but then they'd be fined out of business, or taken to court and forced to pay that. And so the reality is they can force you out of business. You just get to choose which way they do it. Do they tell you to close and you comply, or they tell you to close and you don't, and they fine you until you can't exist anymore anyway?
Well, I was speaking more towards the individual and the worker. For all the workers who are saying, oh, my employer is going to force me to go back to work. No, you can quit. I mean, it's going to suck for you, and you're not going to have any money,
right.
And life's going to be horrible, but you can quit. You don't have to go to work.
Right. In that case, you're right. But when you're talking about an artificial move by the government to shut down portions of the economy, the people who are out of work or the people who are unable to continue to function, that's not a choice. That's not, I wouldn't say that's a choice. And especially when you take small businesses and I had a conversation with my mom who was raised in the 50s. And so she said, I love American ingenuity, and Americans will figure out a way out of this. And I said, the problem is the government is basically telling them, okay, we're going to have you build a wall, but you're not allowed to buy bricks. You're not allowed to buy any of the stuff you'd use to make bricks. But, have fun. Start building. Go ahead. We're not stopping you. Well, yeah, they are. They're just not stopping you by telling you can't build the wall. They're just like the state of Illinois. As of tomorrow, if we go anywhere in public that is indoor, we have to wear a mask. But if you go into Walmart, the fabric cutting section of the store is closed because it's non-essential. You can't buy medical masks anywhere because nobody has them. So you're expected to have a face covering, but they're pulling out all the stops to make it impossible for you to get one. So, okay, well, what are you going to do then? I mean, I'm lucky. I was raised by my mom, who taught me to sew when I was 5, and so my kids are making masks. But that, and of course we're kind of geeks in our house, so our masks are Star Wars and Harry Potter and Marvel comics. So
any Chuck Norris, since they're black belts?
No, I don't have that.
Okay.
Unfortunately, no. But we do, like I said, we have Marvel comics, we've got Star Wars, we've got some Harry Potter, and we've got some other stuff. But yeah, they're having fun making them, and
Hey Kyle, what's the fastest way to a man's heart?
Through his
Chuck
stomach.
Norris fist.
Oh, okay, yeah, good one. So we have another comment from the audience. The ultimate discussion that is glossed over by 99% of the people on this: self-esteem requires self-efficiency. On a fundamental level, we need to think, to act, to live. America is being stripped of its self-esteem by the government with each passing day, not allowing people to work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And in fact, one of the things that I've said is that I think you guys would agree with me. The smallest minority is one, and America has always valued the individual, and that's one of the reasons that this experiment has worked, is that we place value on the individual, and it's not because you are good at a specific job, although that adds value, or in a different way, but the value is in your humanity, and that's one of the things that, if you look at what's going on, the government is telling certain people that their job doesn't matter. Their job, and they're telling some people that their job is essential, and some people that their job isn't. And when you tell somebody that you're no longer needed, that's not, I mean, it doesn't really help foster that value to the individual. It's more like, no, you're unnecessary. You're superfluous. You are no longer a necessary cog in this machine, and good luck to you. And so it kind of chips away at that value. And especially if, like, I was really a little frustrated by Andrew Cuomo, which I think he's done. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but I think he's done a reasonable job in, keeping New Yorkers informed and staying on top of things and saying, hey, this is what we need, this is what we're going to need in the next week, this is how what we've been doing has helped. Now, I think he's made a mistake in treating upstate New York like it's downtown New York City, but when he said to the people who were complaining about being unemployed, go out and get essential jobs, he's telling you that what you did before, everything you were before coronavirus happened, it doesn't matter because we don't need you unless you can do these jobs that we want. And
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's a very sad thing.
it doesn't send the message that all people are, it's at odds with the other, we're all in this together, we're all, no, we're not. You've just told 70% of the country that they don't matter.
I told this to a guy that I thought worked to, that was a good friend of ours. If you're the party of the worker and you think that you're standing with the worker, but then you tell the workers that they're non-essential, that doesn't make it seem as if you're for the worker. And when those workers are saying, hey, we want to go back to work, and you're telling them, no, go sit your butt down, go take your unemployment and be happy about it, I don't think workers are going to resonate with that too much.
That too, and then you have the small businesses who, are not allowed to be open or can't afford to be open. Say you're a bar and you make most of your money on the people who come in and drink. So having the ability to do carry out really doesn't help you because you lose more money staying open than you would.
It does in Texas because we can carry out alcohol.
Yeah, you can now,
and that is staying around even after all this goes away.
I know that's great, but you understand what I'm saying, though, that there are some small businesses that can't afford to stay open. And so somebody made the point to me that, well, they're actually protecting you because if they let you go back to work, then maybe there'd be a hot spot and a lot of people would get sick and blah. I'm like, so what you're telling me is that I should stay home, sit on my butt, and thank the government for protecting me right out of business.
Yeah, it's not the government's job to do that.
No.
Exactly. Their job is to protect us, protect our borders, and
make our roads drivable. Thanks, Louisiana.
Right. But yeah, so they have very limited. Their job is very limited in scope, and it's dangerous to me to suggest that it's their job to keep us healthy, because that opens the door for universal health care, and that's what they want.
Yeah, so, and that goes back to a Friedman principle of economic independence begets political independence. Political independence does not beget economic independence. So, when we've seen this move for the last 30 to 40 to almost 50, 50 years now, since the 1970s, where there's been this push to get more and more people reliant on the government for their way of life. Because when people, and back to Benjamin Franklin, when you have people who will vote for this policy because it's voting for their own paycheck. Benjamin Franklin said, when the people learn that they can vote for their own paycheck, that will be the end of the republic. And we're seeing it very quickly start to escalate towards that. Yeah. And it's a hard fight because, as I said earlier, we have some Republicans who sometimes aren't as staunchly fiscal monetary policy as we'd like them to be. They're all for it when the Democrats are spending the money, but I get mad when some of these Republicans spend money. I understand we have to spend money on some things, right? The government does have to spend some amount of money. They do have to, raise some amount of money, but it seems like there's a certain amount of money. And okay, I understand right now we need to spend money because people are being forced to stay at home. But that just more points out that over the last 10 years, we should have been saving money. We should have been paying debt off. We should have been cutting back. We should have been and they're just trying to get to where more and more people, that's their paycheck. is voting for these people. And if they don't vote for these people, then they're voting against their own paycheck, which, in a rational system, people will not vote against their own paycheck. I'm not going to vote against the oil and gas industry because that's where I make my money. So I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, we did get some good news today when it came to coronavirus.
Yeah.
Von Miller, the former Aggie and current Bronco, has announced that he is tested negative for COVID-19 after he had previously tested positive for it. So either he's cured or there was a false test. So one of the two.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think they have to have, once you've had a positive test, they want like 2 or 3 negative tests in a row before you're considered cured. So, but that's on the way, at least, right?
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
So there's so much going on, and I mean, I guess what do you right now? Because we heard today that maybe Trump is upset because right now he looks like he's losing in the poll. But I did see an interesting thing is that he's actually starting his transition team. So it's a legal requirement that he has to start his transition team 60 days before the general election, which is this Saturday, I guess. And so he is now starting, which that doesn't seem right because November's okay. I'm not certain, but either way,
No days.
so he's starting his transition team. So there's been a lot of people on the left who have said, "Oh, well, if Trump loses, he's gonna pout and he's not gonna leave." And the same thing we said about Obama, and the same thing we said about Clinton, and the same thing they said about Bush, and the same thing they say about every president if they lose in the middle of their full 8-year term.
He's gonna cancel it. They all say that. Yeah,
so he's actually started his transition team, but we saw with polling that polling in 2016 was not very accurate. And do you think that polling right now is more accurate than it was then? Polling is about as accurate as it was then, or that even perhaps polling has gotten less accurate due to the hyper-partisan divide and the unwillingness of people to really tell others what their actual political opinions are?
I think I think that last one is definitely a factor because, especially as polarized as things are now, sometimes it's harder to get people to say what they want. But I think it's interesting. I have seen, especially in my area when I've been out and about, I have seen more of the Keep America Great hats in my area, which is kind of purplish because we're outside of St. Louis, but we're kind of downstate, somewhat rural Illinois. Most of the Democrats in my area are union guys, and they're Democrats because they're union guys. And so, it is not weird to find pro-life Democrats where I live. It's not weird to find, socially conservative Democrats and not like hard left. These are not, AOC's people. These are, Kennedy Democrats. That's really the area that I'm in. And so you see a lot of that. And a lot of them really dislike Trump, but they are also not really, really hard left guys. And so if something happens and Biden is not the guy or his running mate is too far left, these are the people who might stay home. So you see a lot of that. But I mean, I'm seeing more people who are less afraid to say, no, I agree with him. I like this president, and or who will say something about it in public. And so I don't know. But I also know plenty of people who are perfectly fine with wearing a Trump hat out and about. But if you ask them to do a survey, will lie to you because they don't want to be on, they don't want to be on record or whatever.
And there's also the fear that if somebody is calling you, they have your phone number, and then they can dox you, right? And especially with the softwares available today, that people are able to pull a lot of information from a cell phone number. It's like a license plate. You can get a lot of information about somebody from a cell phone number or a home phone number if you really want to. So I know there's people that are legitimately, paranoid that people will show up outside their house and protest them for being a Trump supporter because they live in Austin or they live in downtown San Antonio or downtown Houston, where there's huge sects of hard left people that, vehemently hate Trump supporters or anything that Trump stands for.
Yeah. No, it is interesting just to see the difference in who's willing to say what now. And I've been doxxed before. Actually, I mentioned AOC before. I did a hit on Fox News about a year and a half ago, and I said something about how socialism, you really have to make sure that you know who's going to pay for it. And her minions came after me because it was all after she did a rally in St. Louis, and I went to it, and so I actually have a picture with her, which is really funny.
I was going to use it for my thumbnail, but I didn't want to put her on my thumbnail.
Yeah, and I said on Fox and Friends, I did this hit, and we were talking about how, as a parent, it's really easy to hear things like free education for your kids and free medical care for your kids, and the government's going to take care of you. It's easy to hear that and think, well, yeah, my kids deserve to be taken care of. But the rest of that sentence is, and it's my responsibility to take care of them, not, and it's the government's responsibility. And so, the reality is that conservatives and liberals agree on the problem. Like, my kid needs to be taken care of. We agree on that. What we disagree on is whose job it is to do it, and who's responsible ultimately for that. And so I made that comment, and I got hate mail at my house. People stalked my Instagram, which I don't use at all, much less for politics anymore. And why do you hate kids? I don't. I just think it's my job to pay for them and not yours.
Yeah.
So,
well, we saw that with the Harvard article this week about homeschooling, saying that because they literally in the article said that allowing kids to be homeschooled means that it's not the state that's instilling their ethics, it's their parents.
They're terrified right now because so many millions of Americans who are unwilling homeschoolers right now may be learning that their children learn better in a one-on-one environment than they ever did at school. And since most states now have access to online public schooling that you can do from home, they are terrified.
Yeah.
That kids are not going to be in the system next year because parents are either scared after this bout with coronavirus, they're scared that it's going to come back and whatnot, or they've realized my kid thrives in this environment. Why would I put him back in that petri dish?
Well, and for me, it's like, so I homeschool our children. Well, I don't. My wife does. I'll give credit where credit.
Let's say, Ross, you don't do a whole lot of anything.
Yeah.
Come on now.
My work schedule is very, okay, you're here today. Okay, no, you're in Argentina for the next 2 months. So I couldn't really be the teacher, but my wife does a very good job of homeschooling our children. She's been homeschooling our children. Our public school here threatened to call CPS on us for not enrolling them into school. We had to go through the process of proving to them that they were enrolled in school. And one of the biggest detractors I always hear from people is, oh, well, if my kid is homeschooled, then they can't play sports with their friends or whatever. But the Tim Tebow laws are almost across the board now. They call it the Tim Tebow law after Tim Tebow because now Tim Tebow was homeschooled, but he got to play football in Florida at a public school. Most states have now adopted that to where if you pay taxes in this district, then you can utilize the services of that district schools. So, I mean, for all those who don't, if you're looking for a Christian, we use American Christian Education, ACE program. It's a great program for your kids. I will give them a free shameless plug here.
There you go.
Now, that was one thing I was actually really happy that Governor Abbott didn't do. And it's not just because my wife is a teacher, but he did not tell schools to go back to school. Most school districts in the state of Texas are closed for at least this school year. And there's some talk that they might not come back right away in the fall. But my thought on that was it's a good thing they're not coming back because a lot of these kids, especially in the Bryan school district, live with their grandparents, live with their great-grandparents, stuff of that nature because the parents aren't there. They're not capable of being real parents. So these kids go to these, petri dishes, and now they're getting it. They're not getting sick because they're young and healthy. They're then going to their grandparents and getting their grandparents sick, and all hell breaks loose. So I'm glad schools didn't go back into session because of that reason.
That's an issue in Louisiana too. They estimate, I think, 30% of children in Louisiana, their primary caregiver is not a biological parent; it's a grandparent or somebody else. So yeah, that's certainly an issue. And I think we're going to see that, and I think that when as things open up, we are going to see a few little bumps in cases here and there, because that's how viruses behave. You're going to see, once you open those gates, you're going to see some more. Texas is opening up tonight. Tomorrow, you're going to see more cases in Texas after that happens. It's just how it works. But the idea was to keep it from overwhelming the hospitals, and I think we've gotten to the point where even if we do see a few little bumps here and there, we have the equipment, we have the hospital staff available, we have the ability to treat these people as they get sick, instead of going, oh crap, where are we going to put them all?
Yeah, that's interesting, because there's been a lot of talk on Twitter about, oh, Trump let there be a respirator shortage. There never actually was a shortage of respirators. There was a projection that we would have a shortage of respirators. It never actually occurred. We never were short.
It was also a projection that we were, that New York City was going to need 40,000, and they didn't. In fact, they shipped them out and sent them to other states because they don't have the need. It's the same thing that Washington State gave away ventilators. So did Oregon, because they had too many. They ended up being able to meet the curve and not have, that the overwhelming influx that they expected to have. And you saw that in a lot of places.
Did you see the article from the Dallas paper that stated that they had cured a guy who had been on life support for 30 days with coronavirus by creating I'm going to say serum, but it's probably was something else. But they went back to 1900s technology and use someone's blood who had already had it to create
They've been doing that. That's because the antibodies are in the blood.
Yeah, well, the thing about the article is that they buried the lead on it, and they said that the gentleman that they got the blood from had it back in January, early January.
Yeah.
So that means that this actually has been here significantly longer than we thought. So when we thought the curve was going to start, the curve had already started, 2 months before.
I would agree with that. There were several people in our area that had really, really weird flu type things in January, and that you never know. I mean, we know that the information coming out of China was bad. We know the information that the World Health Organization was bad. I mean, the World Health Organization was still telling us on January 14th that this wasn't contagious person to person. I mean, let's be, and what really gets to me is that we were warned in 2013 that bats and wet markets were likely going to be the source of the next pandemic. This is 2013. Papers were published. This is all out there. And now, realistically, it's looking more and more like this didn't come from a wet market. I mean, it did, but not directly, because the bats, the horseshoe bats, were that carry this specific disease, were not sold at the wet market that they traced this back to. However, they were in a lab less than a mile away from the wet market, and the idea was that an intern may have gotten sloppy, and this is a lab that's been cited several times for security issues and et cetera. And so that's where all this is coming from. The bat lives some 600 miles away from there, and they don't migrate that far. And so the only way for that bat and that disease to get to that area is from the lab. So whether it was, somebody selling them under the table because they got access to them at the lab, which is stupid because they're carrying a disease and that's why they're at the lab. But I think it's far more likely that an intern got infected at work and then happened to go to the wet market because it's right down the street,
Well,
I think that's likely, but
Well,
that's
and
just
the
me.
antibodies testing is showing that likelihood is what California has anywhere between 25 and 85 times as many cases as they suspect they have. So if that's the case, like 54% of their something population has been infected at this point. So it's very likely that at this point in time, and of course, we don't know this for certain, but there's a strong possibility that you've been exposed to it already, and that if you were going to catch it
Right.
at this point, you probably would have. And
I mean, I was at CPAC, so I don't know if I, I don't know if I,
Mike
because they
Cernovich went
haven't.
crazy about that, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't release the name of the person who had it there, so I don't know. So I don't know if I had any contact with them, but I do know I had secondary contact because I shook hands with Doug Collins. I met Carter Page. There were a bunch of people who said that they knew they were directly exposed. So secondary, yeah, I probably was, but again,
Well,
Just ask Ted Cruz. He'll tell you who had it.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it's interesting because I think what we're seeing now is that the transmissibility of this is a lot higher than we initially anticipated, but the lethality is a lot less than we initially anticipated. And of course, the scare is not the transmissibility; it's the lethality. If the lethality of it is very low, then the risk that the precautions we've been taking were probably not necessary. And I mean, now that's hard to say when we've had 50,000 deaths that can be associated with it.
yeah.
But there's also, we had Dr. Burks on last week saying, look, any hospital that has a suspected case is listing it as a COVID-19 case. We'd rather overlist than underlist.
Well, and here's the thing, though. I mean, it cuts both ways because if you're saying that that it was here much earlier than we thought it was, there were a bunch of deaths in January unexplained. As if you can even go back as far back as November, and we were seeing unexplained spikes in flu-related deaths that were not testing positive for influenza. So, depending on how far back you want to go with this and how far back we think this actually came, if we're talking about unrestricted travel from China until the end of January, and they had it, if they had it as far back as November even, and it was coming into the United States, we would start to see those spikes, and that would mean that there were thousands of uncounted cases
Yeah.
too. So yeah, they might be counting cases that aren't COVID now, but there may be thousands of COVID cases that they had and didn't know about, and now these people are buried, and you can't go back and unless you want to exhume every influenza related death that wasn't a positive test. There's no way to get a correct
Yeah.
number, and that's going to be the difficulty here, is that you can't ever get a correct number, because unless you actually know how many people were ever infected, you don't have the correct denominator. You can't find death rate if you don't know what to divide by. You can't, if you don't know how many people actually had it, you can't ever get a correct
So
death
if,
rate.
if you had Governor Pritzker's ear and you weren't actively twisting it because you were mad at him for whatever he's doing right now,
Wouldn't do-
what do you think would be your recommendation to him as far as when the state could open or should open, or is it just we should open now?
I would say that evidence suggests at this point that social distancing guidelines, whether it's wearing masks and gloves in public, whether it's staying 6 feet away from people, I think that closing the schools was probably the right call, and keeping them closed through the end of the year is probably the right call. As far as going on from there, I couldn't tell you. And but I think that this should be done locally. It should be done county by county, zip code by zip code, however you want to do it, because the local authorities can better account for where the cases are, where the risks are, who is creating problems, who's doing the right thing, how they handle that on a day-to-day basis. But to sit in Chicago and say that people who don't use public transportation, don't live in giant apartment buildings where everybody touches everything on the way from one floor to the next. Um, we don't have the same risk, therefore we should not face the same mitigation, if that makes sense. So I would say, remember that you are the governor of a state full of individuals, and you are the governor of a state full of counties that are very different. And to treat them all as if they're the same, you're quarantining a lot of healthy people in order to justify keeping a lockdown on Chicago, when the reality is the only place you need to lock down is probably Chicago. So, that's all I would say, is that, you can't treat rural Illinois like it's, in the basement of the Sears Tower. Because we're just not. It's a very different landscape here. Not, literally, but it's
Yeah, if
just
you
that.
try to treat Harris County and Lee County, Texas, as the same thing, that's vastly different, and the population densities are significantly different. Houston's millions and millions of people, whereas Lee County maybe has 100,000 in the whole county. So yeah, treating them as the same is just stupid. But I want to change subjects, or change uh, topics a little bit, real quick. So we kind of touched on it earlier about VP nominations for the Democrats. Who do you think would be a better pick for Biden? Would it be Tulsi Gabbard or Kamala Harris?
Huh. What's interesting is that I thought if Bernie won the nomination, Tulsi would be his pick.
Because she's more.
Because he is so far left, and she has made a pretty good show of convincing people that she's moderate. And I think that it's been long enough since 2016 that there are a lot of people who don't remember that she quit her job at the DNC to endorse Bernie in 2016. And that's why Hillary hates her. That's why Hillary tried to make her out as a Russian asset. And that's where all that came from. But I think Bernie knows that she is really, really good at playing to that moderate base. Because she has, especially because some of her foreign policy ideas really line up with a lot of conservatives. It would be really easy for the never Trumpers to look at Tulsi Gabbard and see something in her that they liked. Then she's just likable. She's just one of those people, while all the other Democrats were arguing with each other on the Sunday shows, she's posting videos of herself going out caroling with her neighbors. She's just genuinely more likable than a lot of the other candidates out there. And I think that would be her strength going into a possible Biden ticket. But I don't know. I haven't heard what she said on Tara Reid. I just know that if I were even halfway tempted to vote for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris would be a deal breaker. And that's just because I cannot stand her voice. And it's just me. Her voice grates on me, and I can't do it.
You don't agree with Samantha Bee that she should be vice president and attorney general all at the same time?
Oh gosh, I didn't even realize that Samantha Bee was still talking. Um, no, I don't agree with that. In fact, there are a lot of jobs that Kamala Harris would be good at, and those are neither of them.
I heard she was a fairly good assistant to the governor, the former mayor of San Francisco.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that. I think that say what you want about that. I don't. It is what it is. He came out and said she shouldn't be president, so I'll take that at face value. Yeah, that I'm not a Kamala Harris fan, but maybe that's just me.
I was a fan of her on Saturday Night Live when they had what's her name portraying her on Saturday Night Live. It was hilarious.
Oh, see, I missed that. Was that when they were still shilling for Warren?
Yeah,
On
yeah,
that
that's
channel?
when they were still shilling for Warren hard.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
And then
I don't see Warren being an effective VP either. She sounds like she is one more sentence away from bursting into tears every time she talks, and it's just like if she has to tell you one more time, she's just gonna have it. That yeah, I'm not no. Um, the reality is he is between a rock and a hard place because he has to pick a woman because he said he did that he said he was going to. Um, and the only sane person left is Amy Klobuchar. and, and this is a woman who admitted on national television that the last time she went golfing, she killed a duck. So, I mean, take that one. I'm not lying about that. She said she hit the duck, and then a few seconds later, she said, "Well, and the duck died." And it was just this awkward pause, like the interview. What do I do with this?
So we did have a comment that said that he would totally vote for Kamala Harris for a non-essential job.
Oh my.
that Tulsi would get the Rogan audience vote, which is millions of people, kind of like Bernie did, but that didn't really help Bernie either.
Yeah,
But that's
well,
because Bernie kind of had to distance himself from Rogan because Rogan's more of a conservative.
Tulsi actually, I think, is more likable than Bernie is, especially in a vice presidential spot, because again, I go back to she hasn't, aside from meeting with Assad, which a few people are genuinely upset about. Most people don't really even remember that she did that. They just heard what she said about getting America out of endless wars, and they like that. And there are a lot of people, and for good reason. She wants to stop the regime change war, and that's something that a lot of people right now are weary of because this is multi-generational now. You're not talking just to the guys who are it's impacting now. You're talking about the guys like you guys, like me. This war is now multi-generational. I mean, my dad went to Afghanistan as part of the war that we're still fighting. And so, and that was in 2002. My son was born, you know, 9 months before we declared war on Iraq in 2003, and he's 17. So this has been going on for he's almost 18. This has been going on for some people's entire lives, and they're getting ready to vote for the first
Yeah.
time.
Well,
So
well,
you consider
well,
that.
Virginia, I wanna thank you for the time. It's now been an hour and 45 minutes, believe it or not, that we have been talking. So I want to appreciate you for so much for coming on and talking with us, and Kyle and I'm sure
Yeah.
I'll speak for Kyle that we're happy to, if you ever want to come back, we would be more than happy to have you back another time. But I'm sure we got some people who are ready to go to bed and want to go to sleep, and I'm sure my wife would like my participation in our household at some point in time tonight. So for all of our listeners, dailycaller.com. Virginia Kruta is one of the associate editors there. She's a writer there. You can see all of her stuff there. Make sure you go read every story she's written. A lot of it's about The View. I'm going to tell you right now. There's quite a few stories about The View. But, hey, she gets paid per click. So just click on it, click out of it, and go about your day.
No, I don't actually. I get paid for producing. So
Okay.
yeah, I get paid for based on production. So that's yeah.
So
And so I get to write opinions, so that's fun.
that's
too.
good. So, dailycaller.com, at VA Kruta, that's VAKRUTA. So I'll do Victor Alpha, Kilo, Romeo, Uniform, Tango Alpha.
Yes.
There we go.
There you go.
So that's my big thing is I like the phonetic alphabet for everybody. Thank you again so much for coming on. Is there any last words we need to know before we let you go?
Not that I can think of right now.
Well, we hadn't covered already, huh? So Kyle, what about you?
I just want to thank her so much for coming on. I had a couple more questions I wanted to ask, but darn, we run out of time. Ross mentioned Justin Amash, and I was going to bring that up, but we'll talk about that another time.
He's officially running for president.
Again, just
speak for you.
yeah. Greatly appreciate you coming on, spending almost 2 hours with us. Is there any social media platform that you want to, in your book, that you want to plug before we leave?
No, I'm just still working on it. I'll probably be tweeting progress. I tend to put stuff out on Twitter before anything else. You can find Virginia Kruta on Facebook. I have an author page, a verified author page, so you can find that one as well. And so I occasionally post articles and sometimes more personal stuff there. It's not my private page, but it's work related. So, and I've posted quite a bit about my grandfather that I'm writing about. So that's there too.
All right, that's great. So for everybody, thank you so much for paying attention and listening to us. We did get quite a few viewers tonight. For all those that are watching this on repeat, thank you so much for sitting through this and watching all of it. Hope it was entertaining. Hope it was good for you. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much to Miss Virginia for coming on and being part of this. And I'm so thankful and grateful that you accepted our invite. Kyle and I like to say it that we go fishing. Sometimes we put out the little lines. Sometimes we put out the big lines. We got a big fish. We got a big fish this time. So we're so thankful that you were willing to come on with us and put up with our snark and cynicism and idiocy for as long as you did.
Sure.
So for everybody that's listening again, it's for me, like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you've put the notification bell. Make sure you hit it so that you know every bit of it. We got some more interviews coming up next week. We do have, we're continuing to try to pull in more guests. We're going to try to get Miss Virginia back at some point in time if she's willing to, and we'll keep going. For Kyle on Facebook, it's at Kyle Schumann 08. That's at Kilo Yankee Lima Echo Sierra Charlie Hotel Uniform Mike Alpha November Saddle 8. For me, it's at Ross Schumann. That's at Romeo Oscar Sierra Charlie Hotel Uniform Mike Alpha November. For anybody else, make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you hit the button if you're new here. Hope you enjoyed it. Everybody, have a great night. God bless you all.
Thanks and gig 'em and God bless.
I think I'm going off the deep end. I think I took a left when I should have took a right at the bend. I think I'm looking at the wrong trends. All these different people around me and they're calling me friend. Come on man, let's just pass the time. From amphetamine